Welcome to the roundtable discussion for the Face of the Update design competition. We are going to go through in this video all the finalists once again, but this time around in a very much free-for-all format where we just throw in our opinions for the individual cars here and there, and it is much more of a discussion. So a little bit less structured, but should be equally as much fun for those of you who want to know a little bit more about our thought process and more about why we chose to rate the cars how we did. All right, I hope this is going to be enjoyable for you, and here we go.
Well, one of the things that my initial thought when I looked at this car was, I just saw, like, this is not really so much a sports car, but we're trending more towards like a GT convertible, like a Mercedes SL, or take like a Lexus SC400 or Toyota Soarer if you're in that market, and just cut the roof off. Like, this is a really understated conservative design that seems more in line with like a luxury car than a sports car. Until you look at the hood bump, and then you think that engine must be massive, and those tires must.
The tires are what are getting me, really. I mean, just spin the car around, please.
Yeah, this thing has massive. It's got massive presence in the rear from those huge tires. Like, they dominate the rear to the point of being a little bit too much.
Yeah, one thing that sticks out there, I believe, is the logo. Or did that appeal to you?
It's a different kind of logo. I mean, everybody has their own take on what makes a good logo or a bad logo. I mean, I'm not really one to comment on that because the logos I have done for my lore cars are not great, to be honest, so I'm in no position to judge. It does give a measure of completeness to the car to have your own custom logo, though. It's more than just, slapping on one of the automation sort of badge mods or badge fixtures and be done with.
Yeah, that's true. But what did you think about the double seating roll cage-esque implementation of the rear seat? Or it's a very modest implementation of a 2+2, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't really think too much about that, to be honest. It looks like a mistake to me. It does feel a lot like a mistake. I mean, I know where they're coming from and I know what the intention is, but it just didn't turn out in the end, I don't think. The same with the pillar and the glass. Like the little smoker's window. I mean, it should have been sloped forward considerably, because now you've got this teeny tiny little roll up, roll down section that just looks weird. It's definitely got presence though, that's for sure.
Yes, I've instantly fell in love with the side of it. Like, the profile is really nice. I think it has strong lines. Yeah. And then the front is disappointing. And the rear is hilarious because of the tires. And, well, that kind of breaks the car for me. But it started so well.
I did not like the vents on the fenders.
Yeah, I commented about that as well. That it's one of the vents or the other vent would have been good, but both of them together is not really a good look. And I think the one you would have wanted to keep is the upper one, but also without that second. There's too many side markers on the car, because you have the one in the front bumper, and sure, that's fair enough. But then you have another one in the fender, so it's a little bit redundant. I like the fog lights in the front grille though, down low. That's pretty cool. They're well implemented and very, very period appropriate. Actually, one more thing I'd like to point out in this, you can actually see it quite well in the front 3/4 view, is the way that the body. The door shut lines are cut through that body molding is actually a really difficult and advanced tactic for car construction. So well done to 66 Mazda for doing that. That's
it looks like it's just perfect. I mean,
yeah,
I didn't even notice, which means that it's probably really nicely done.
I don't really have a whole lot to say in the interior of that car either. It's very Germanic, very precise, very austere.
And then the logo on the steering wheel kind of sticks out a bit.
A little bit. It would have been better, I think, in chrome and red instead of the white and red. That's a little much. But on to the next car.
Yes.
I really like the black and red stripe. The way that it just goes all the way around the car. It really
Perfect,
kind of
yes.
it ties everything together very, very nicely.
It does, and that is why I rated it with such high design consistency. It was just all around feeling like the same car instantly, and that line made it had a big effect on that score for me. It's just very well implemented.
The red highlight was shared as well. Like it's in the roof, it's in the interior, it's even in the hood vent as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the hood vent if that was actually intentional or not, because that kind of looks a little bit like default automation red paint. I'd have to ask the submitter if that was intentional or not. If it isn't, that's pretty cool, for sure. I really like the red top though. That's a neat detail, and it's very, very 90s, having a really bright colored convertible top. I think we probably all agreed on this one, but the design in the front kind of let this one down a bit.
But I found the framing on the back to be like really excellent.
Oh, the proportions in the rear are
fantastic.
Absolutely fantastic. Maybe one of the best of all the cars in the field, actually.
Especially from this straight on rear angle.
It really works.
And you can actually see this one has just a default automation company badge on it. It does, having your own badge really does kind of add that little bit extra, even if it's maybe not necessarily the most attractive badge in the world. This is the one view here, looking at from the rear 3/4. That's one of the views for me that just kind of took away from the car, because it's you had the really nice front and the really nice back, but along the sides, apart from the stripe, you really didn't have a whole lot going on, and it felt disconnected in a way. I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to put it.
Would you have put in some body molding line there as well to offset that?
Just a little, just even a hint of body line would have really set that off nicely, I think. What do we think of the interior?
What stuck out to me there is that it seems to be an odd combination of like 80s, 70s, 80s, proper nice chromed meters in there for the oil and pressure gauges and whatnot, and then like plasticky infotainment, no, not infotainment, but controls for your cassette player, and there was a bit of an offset there, but overall I think it's nicely crafted still. So especially the doors. Look at the doors. Like how much detail effort got into there. It's perfect.
Those are all, I think those are actually all individual fixtures, just sort of duplicated along the length of the door card. So a lot of detail and thought went into that. I also really like these roll hoops too. That's really quite a nice feature. It's kind of too bad they didn't actually have the top down, because they would have looked really good.
They do look good from the back shot as well. From the outside of the car, they actually look quite coherent.
Yeah.
So one thing I think we should point out is that this is the car that had the highest pre-judge score of all of the entrants. So it is a car that, it came with a decent photo, I believe, or a good one even. And that sure has helped it. But overall, it's just a car that at least has a really solid appeal right from the start.
I agree completely. The prejudging shot came in, and it was by far the best shot in the entire field of the 57 entries. It wasn't necessarily, you could tell it wasn't the best car immediately, but it was so well shot. It was one that I think everybody who looked at it was like, well, we really want to get a better look at it. So it got the most votes of anyone, positive. This one came in with a very period-appropriate photo. You know, it was very sort of washed out, very stark, with a very dark background and very strong lighting, like exactly what you'd see out of a manufacturer's brochure in the mid to late 90s. So it got voted through, but it's got some things going on with it, to say the least.
I think the line of headlight to side vent to door handle seems very low.
Yeah.
It makes the car kind of look a bit like hunched over.
The issue is with this, and it's a bit of an issue with this body, but it can be worked around. But what's happened here is everything is so low and so flat, it's built a lot of visual sort of width to the car. It makes it look very low and very squat, and it's not really the best look for a car to have that. Especially for a car that's already... Yeah.
Everything on the front compresses, really.
Yeah. And for a car that's already low and wide to begin with, the last thing you really want to be doing is building in more sort of visual width to it than making it look even wider and even lower. Because then, as you can see here, it really affected the proportions quite negatively. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the way that the stripe was done is, it's a little bit unusual. You know, I would have maybe, it would have greatly added to the complexity, but I probably would have had it on like a white background. So the colors would have stood out a little bit more, and maybe actually made it sort of a symmetrical, like blue, white, blue, or red, blue, red on the white background. I think that would have looked really quite striking.
One thing that I thought when I looked around the car was that I can't recognize the car from, after seeing it from the front, I can't recognize it from the side or from the back. And those are like all the three sides seem to be quite different in design. The side especially seems rather like disjointed in design. I can't see the context really between the vent and the, well, there are just three items on there, right? So the blinker, the door handle, and the vent. And there's not much connection between them. But then the front to back also, I couldn't tell that is the same car.
Yeah, I agree. It was a very disjointed car, design-wise. And especially from the rear, I mean, there are a lot of choices that I would not have made. You know, there's so many clashing levels of fixtures. Like you have all the chrome badging and then the lettering, and then you have the tail lights, and they're all at different levels, and there's no real sort of harmony between them. And the same kind of theme of disjointedness continues in the lower fascia with the license plate and the fog lights and the exhaust. And also the race diffuser's a little bit... This may be a bit much for a car like this, I think.
I definitely think the diffuser is overkill. I also noticed that the rear is quite a strong smiley face, and the front is quite an angry face, which doesn't tie the front and back together very well. Also, the side marker is round, and it's basically the only round thing on the car.
One thing that I would say though is that I think the front design is actually nicely composed. It does look like it's good. It doesn't. I don't say that it fits the car necessarily, but I think the what we have there looks pretty much like more of a, if you had to put this on a naturally flatter and wider body, I think the design on the front would work really well.
I'd even give it a little bit more than that. I'd say that with a little bit of tuning, this front end could look really good on this car. Like all the elements for a good design are there. They're just not quite, it's like they're just not quite put together quite to that level just yet.
I think they're just vertically squished. So if the line across the top of the grille and the bonnet were raised up slightly, and the grille and number plate were all moved up, and the headlights were moved up, I think it could look a bit more coherent.
Yeah. Another thing I'd like to point out is the paint color, is that I think there's maybe a bit too much metal flake in it, and it's given the car the look of somebody who's got a big bass fishing boat with crazy metal flake and painted their car to match it. It's a little over the top.
I agree with that, yes.
I thought the interior choices, I really like the floating center console. That's kind of cool. And I kind of like the gauges and the colors with the blue, even though it's not really necessarily the best for driving at night, specifically as having the blue light. But it's a neat look. Although I think the steering wheel is a little bit over the top with the full carbon fiber.
I can't look past the cup holders being an inch deep.
I noticed that too, but overall I agree that is a nicely crafted interior, and also again having the lettering there, and this seems to be nicely thought out with the name of the car again there, and the console overall looking really good. And also, while it is a bit over the top, I think it does keep a nice subdued look to it. So it's not too sprung in your face. It's not trying to wow you on the inside necessarily, but it's still just very nicely crafted.
It's a very appropriate interior for this kind of car. You know, it's not over the top. It's very focused. It gives the driver the information they need and not a whole lot more. And for a sports car, I mean, that's really all you want at the end of the day. The controversial one.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, complete custom build here. Basically, from what I understand, removing the chassis, either almost entirely or entirely, and then building the car from scratch by 3D fixtures.
Yep. This car is completely from the ground, basically from the tires up, is all 3D fixtures. There's actually very little of the automation car that was based on left, if anything.
The rear arch really stands out. Like my eye is drawn straight to that rear arch, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's especially the way that the rear arch just kind of terminates and just is kind of left floating in space. There probably could have been something added to it, you know, whether it just had a little, almost like a little wing element to continue the wing that's mounted centrally.
It should have, it should have merged with the wing, I believe, in some capacity, or could have at least. So because that would also make sense aerodynamically that it's terminated in that way instead of just
sawed off.
Yeah, sawed off and causing loads of turbulence there and so on.
The other thing I'd like to point out with wheel arches is the complete absence of front wheel arches. So
yes, I noticed that.
This would be a great car to drive on a nice, clean, dry track, but if it's dirty or dusty or raining, you and your passenger are going to be filthy.
Fun times if you're driving country roads and there was just a little bit of a tractor driving in front of you carrying loads of you know what. Yes.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. That would be a nice cleanup job, and brush your teeth, please.
Yeah. The other thing I've noticed too is the front headlights and the front bumpers, and actually to a lesser extent the rear bumper, really feel like just a complete afterthought.
Yeah, the rear and front bumper don't match as well.
No.
I think the rear as a whole, though, works really well. The light setup with the wing on top and framing, and even the bumper there being simple but working, seems to be a really nice combination. It looks good from the back.
Yeah, from the back, this is a fantastic design. It's very well composed. And the nice thing too is like the designer has actually incorporated what little is left of the automation car as part of the visual design with the push rod rear suspension.
I think the interior is just spot on for this kind of car. Like it feels raw and really on point.
I think this is my favorite interior of all the cars in the show, except for maybe one of them.
I would agree.
Just the details in it, especially if you look really close in, you can actually see like a fully exposed and fully crafted shift linkage for the manual transmission. That is so cool.
And even the detail, like the passenger having his handle to hold on, it's so good. You see that there?
Yeah, the oh shit bar is a nice touch for sure. And well, the fire extinguisher I think is actually it's a mod fixture just by itself, so that's pretty cool to see that incorporated. The materials though are very nice, with the exception of the carbon fiber texture. I think is a little bit on the big side. That could have maybe been shrunk down a little bit to make it look a little bit more believable. But overall, I mean, this is a fantastically designed car. It's just not really what we were looking for. This is more of a track day car than it is sort of a sports car. I mean, my thought is this is the kind of car we were looking for, is the kind of car that you and your significant other would be happy to get into and go for a drive on a weekend day. This does not look like the kind of car you'd be able to get your wife or girlfriend or husband or boyfriend into and actually really enjoy driving as a passenger. Ooh, this car.
The headlights look like they're in tubes.
Yes. Well, what is wrong with that?
There's better ways that you can implement that. And that's kind of my theme with this car, is that it's a very ambitious build, and there are some fantastically complicated things being done here. And I give the builder full credit for trying, but it's just messy and not very well implemented.
I thought this car has a case of automationitis, whereby none of the smooth curves can actually be smooth.
Yeah, that's some of the problem for sure. I just thought it was a lot of ambition, and it just didn't really play out. Like, especially the big thing that really threw me off was the combination of having all of the little snaps on the tonneau cover around where the roof attaches, and then just this massive haphazard fixtures for the actual tonneau cover itself. It's just like, it's a great idea and it's very ambitious. It's just sloppily put together, unfortunately. With a little bit of care and attention, this could have been a spectacular car.
Well, you know what? I would argue that it is a spectacular car if you, and that's why I scored it so highly. Okay, now do me a favor and just squint a little and rotate around the car. I think it looks absolutely stunning. Like, this is a looker. If you just squint a little, you think this is the best car in the world. Oh well, maybe not.
Yeah, and if you squint a little bit looking at me, I look like Brad Pitt.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh shit.
The other thing is the wheel fitment is really weird on this. Like, they're so far inset in the car. It actually really, I mean, I'm sure there's a technical reason why the designer did this, but it really kind of detracts from the appearance of the car, having especially the front wheels so deeply inset into their wheel wells. This is kind of where it really fell apart here for me, is the rear. It's just messy and a little bit incoherent. Like, this could have been really, really good, like a truly spectacular build, but it just felt like it was rushed a little bit. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thought with this whole design, is it had all the ideas to be really just an absolute knockout, just not quite to the level that they were deserving, I don't think. With a bit more work, this could be an absolutely stunning car. Not too sure about the interior though.
The dash is very, very small, very far away from the seats.
Yeah.
Also, the coloring might be more something for the 60s than the 90s.
The dark mocha leather is a bit of a... It's not really quite even the right shade, I don't think. And the other thing too is I found the instrument cluster to be, with the crazy 80s style digital dash, I found it to be a little bit of an anachronism for a car for the 90s or 2000s. It's not really fitting. I quite like this one, actually.
It's very cute.
Yeah, very well proportioned and very well designed. And they also have that trick that I was talking about on 66 Mazda's car, where the side fixtures are basically perfectly cut out to match the door shut lines, that's a really nice thing to see, that attention to detail.
But then they missed the yellow in the wheel arches.
Yeah.
Which is very sad, because I think the design itself looks fantastic and it's very photogenic, except for the wheel arches.
Yeah. And that would have been, I mean, you could have just fixed that with, a wheel arch fixture just slapped inside it in the front and one in the back, and it would have been an absolute knockout.
Or even just like a black box of some sort, because I can understand that the arches are made of multiple pieces and that some of those are coming through, but just the yellow stands out on the black. Just strong.
I really want to like this car. I really do. And I scored it not that highly because I just found it, compared to some of the other things that we've seen here, it's very nicely done, but it's so boring. I find it so boring. That's why I scored it only its overall appearance 11. It's just like a car where I would see it on the road, I would be thinking like, yeah, that fits here. And then not think about it anymore. This is not a looker to me.
The only reason it grabs your attention immediately is because of the bright yellow paint on it, which
Yes.
is,
Good choice.
I would say that of all of the cars in this field, this is the one that is most appropriately painted for the type of car we're looking for. The color is absolutely spot on. But it does kind of have that look of, you look at the car and then you kind of look away and don't really think too much about it beyond that. Proportions in the rear are really fantastic. And it does kind of have that early 90s simplicity from what you'd expect for a car like this.
What I didn't quite like here is the offset of the three middle fixtures, like the boot lock, the logo, and then the text on it. Those feel like they have been thrown on there. Like there's no theme to it, really.
I think if it was just that the boot lock was just a little bit repositioned to be a little bit more in line with the text and the line between the two taillights, that would have been perfect. But it is a little bit kind of out there.
I think the vents in the rear bumper are a bit out there for the era of car as well. They usually had just basic rounded bumpers, which would have been really nice because of that molding line that the bumper has, but the grills throw it off a bit.
Yeah, and that molding line was added in by the builder too. It's a very nice touch. But of course this is a mid-engine car too. It's not actually front-engine, so maybe the grills would work, maybe not. Maybe a different shape. I don't know.
I love the addition of the dummies in the interior, just sitting there. Also, the posing of them is great with the just the arm hanging out there casually. It's beautiful. It's nicely done.
That's super fun. That's really fun. I like that too. And the other thing that's nice about it is that it actually gives you a sense of scale for the car to have the dummy in it. I mean, I know it's not actually a human figure, but the dummy is sort of average human being sized. I think maybe a little bit bigger. So it kind of ties everything together to actually see some, a human or human-like shape in it. The interior is fairly nice otherwise too.
Other than the mesh hoop looking like someone has made it out of box steel.
I think if that was made out of like the round exhaust fixtures, because those actually have proper elbows and bends in them, that would have looked really pretty cool.
Yeah, the rest of the car is so rounded and soft, and then there's this aggressive square in the interior which doesn't quite match.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I was looking for a reason for why this is ticking me off a little, and now you gave it to me.
I think there's a little too much red in some places too. I mean, maybe it's just me, but I just don't really care for the red steering wheel.
It's too bright red. If it was much more muted red and more towards wine red, I think that would look quite nice.
Yeah, like the one car earlier, that had a really nice red interior. This car really confounded me because I think it has a very nice front, perfectly period appropriate with the pop-up headlights and the orientation of the fog lights and indicators. And I think maybe the best rear of all of the cars in the field, but the side is just so disjointed on it. There's parts that continue and discontinue kind of at random, no sort of harmony between the levels of where the body molding and the vents are, and it's unfortunate because this is such a good design otherwise. The side just feels like they ran out of time, basically.
The most obvious issue to me is that there's this beautiful body molding line across the front and back, and then it just doesn't cross across the side of the car. There's the trim panel lower than it, but that line isn't consistent at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If that body line continued across the whole body, it would have been a knockout.
I do really enjoy the body kit side skirt, whereby the body is pushed out slightly, but then there's still space for the door to swing open. That's a nice touch.
That is a good point, yeah. It could have been maybe brought in a little bit tighter to where the door shut lines, but it does kind of have a bit of a more of aggressive feel. I think the other thing too that really doesn't help with this car is that the wheels are awfully small.
They're also very aftermarket looking, I would argue. And as per a few of these cars, it has fender vents, which are redundant.
The back view of the car, this back side view of the car is really getting me though. It's like, I think it looks really good, especially the top half of it.
I mean, this
the
straight
back
on
is
rear
just
view.
wow.
This is fantastic between the tail lights and it's how you have the inset reverse lights and how they integrate so nicely with the number plate and also the molding in the lower section. I mean, this car absolutely nailed the rear for sure.
The lower lip on the rear is inconsistent with the sides and front again.
Yeah, a little more consistency all around the car would have gone a long way. Especially this really lower lip that goes right around the bottom through where the exhaust cutouts are. That doesn't really repeat anywhere else in the car. This interior and this one is, I was so hot and cold on it because I really don't like the color because it doesn't match anything else in the car, the green. But the instrument cluster is so well done. I think
you know what?
Maybe
That is a very good point, I think. But also, I would say that the color of the car is off to me. It's probably the worst choice of color. No, second most worst choice of color that we've seen here or will see. Maybe what do you think if the car was the green color on the inside instead?
I'll give the color a bit of a pass for the car because teal was the big color in the 90s. Whether you liked it or not, every car seemingly that 1995 to 1998 window was in a variation of this. I'm not so sure this is the best kind of teal color for a car. Like I think a little bit more, something a little bit brighter would have popped nicer. But I can kind of give it a pass on the color. Maybe a bit less metal flake in it too. It is a little bit much.
But yes, you were saying about the interior. There are way too many gauges there, aren't there? Dude, what are you measuring? Like you have all those and then plus the two others and yeah, what is it?
The other two are maybe a bit redundant, but the main instrument cluster with the tachometer and speedometer.
Oh, that's perfect, yeah.
Those are, I think that might be the best cluster in the whole of all of the finalists, just taken in isolation.
Is this a turbo car? Because then I can give it a pass for having the two extra gauges there.
I actually don't know if it's a turbocharged car or not. I think
we just say it is a turbocharged variant of the car, or trim of the car. So well, it's fine then. But yes, I agree. The interior otherwise is really nicely crafted, or not even otherwise, but in general, it's really nicely crafted.
I wanted to love this car because I know exactly what it's trying to be, but it's kind of not really that appropriate for the build. I mean, if we were looking for a Dodge Viper, we would ask for a Dodge Viper. And that's basically what this thing is, even right down to the gigantic V10 engine in it. I
also thought it had really great presence overall. Just instant looker. It's really good looking. And then it's like, nah, this just doesn't fit the category.
And there are, when you start looking a little closer, there are some kind of more questionable design decisions. Like, I really like the side skirt. I like the big loud side exhausts. That's super cool. And I like the stripe on the hood. But when you get to the front grille, especially the lower section, it's a little weird. But where it really, really falls apart for me is the rear. The rear is just, and you know, some of the problem is because there's no exhaust, it's like there's something missing from the rear. And you have to do something in place of that if you're going to have the side exhausts, especially considering that this car looks like it's got almost like an aftermarket style body kit on it. You have to repeat that all around the car.
Yes, the rear is probably the weakest part of the car to me as well. It's as long as I look at it from the front side, it's like a wow car, and then from the rear it was well, you're right. There's something missing there, and well, exhaust pipes. You could just put fake tubes on there. It's like, yeah, this one has 8 exhausts instead of just 4, which also are quite generous, I have to say, because, oh well, if this is supposed to be a muscle car, then you could argue there's quite a bit of flow coming out, so you need a little bit more, but, yeah. But also, I think the white color here, it's just the lighting that doesn't do it any favor, because the it's just all getting washed out. And there might be no detail to see, but it's certainly not visible if there is any.
Yeah, there really wasn't any detail to begin with. Apart from the one little line that runs into that red reflector in the bumper, there's really not a whole lot going on back there, which is, I mean, it is washed out, but there's nothing to wash out in the rear.
I do like that, even though looking from the rear quarter, the car is not the best looking, you can still see the huge hood bump from the back rear.
This car, I mean, it's all about the engine in this one, and it even without even being able to see the engine, you can see that it's the main event with this car for sure. And the designer's done a great job of making sure that it is, you show to the whole world you're packing something special with this.
What instantly came to my attention here is just this looking towards the driver center console thing that is having a good direction to it. I thought there was a creative approach to it. I quite enjoy that.
Very reminiscent of the Dodge Viper of the era. It was very driver-centric with the interior. And really, when you think about it with a sports car like this, that's what you want, because it's all about driver experience, so that's all you care about is how the driver experiences the car. Doesn't really matter what the passenger thinks.
This car is also a good example of how to do windows.
Yeah, we have to say that those are looking fantastic, don't they? Like from the side, rear, this shot is amazing. Well, not that one necessarily, but the other one from the rear side. That is looking so good.
I hadn't really even considered that, but now that you've pointed out, it is really very well done. The shape is spot on.
Yeah, it has the accurate, smooth rear curve for where the soft top would wrap around it.
That shouldn't leak too much in the rain, in theory. Very controversial car. It's so weird. It's so bizarre. Weird. And yet it's so well done.
Like I mentioned in my review, it is definitely a cult following car.
Absolutely. That's a very good way of putting it, Isaac. This is a total cult following car.
Also, it's a ute? Maybe?
It almost looks like it could be, but it's...
Or is it rear engine?
It's so... I believe it's front engined.
Oh, okay. Well, that is an interesting fact then. Either you have a gigantic boot there, then, or you're a convertible ute, which would make that even more culty. Yes.
This kind of feels a little bit like it's a 5-door hot hatchback that's been converted into a convertible in sort of a hasty manner. Which, when you think about it, especially since this car obviously has the flash of the Italian flag all over it, a lot of the manufacturers at the time in Italy were kind of strapped for cash, and this is how they would do a car like that, is they take what they have and just cut the roof off and say, she's a convertible now.
Can we just have a brief line appreciation time on the side? It's holy shit, it is. Those lines are just great.
They're fantastic. I mean, this body has quite a few lines to begin with, but the designer here has taken them to the next level with their work.
I love that they all kind of come together at the front as well. You would expect that having this huge butt and then this very thin nose wouldn't look great, but because all the lines meet, it just looks perfect.
Yep. I actually really like those weird little fog lights in the grille.
Looking like half lights. Yeah, it's a great touch, yes.
We should give this one a shout out for wheel choice too. This is such a good wheel choice for the car. Maybe the best of all the cars in the field.
So one thing about the back, though, that I was pointing out, I believe, in my review as well, is that the back looks like proper blocky sports car, while the rest of the car doesn't have quite that look. I really love the back, though. Like, the composition this looks like a real car to me, like properly, nicely designed. And then I don't get the same vibe from the front as I do from the back.
Yeah, the front the front feels very, I almost want to say inviting and friendly. You know, with its big bug eyes and sort of small, neat features. And the back feels very muscular in a way. Like its interior in this one is fantastic. I quite like it. If only because it's got the orange gauges and the little red highlight that runs between the instrument cluster and the passenger side door. That's a really nice touch.
I definitely think it's one of the most consistent with the exteriors of all of the cars. Maybe because the red tie-in color actually works this time.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, it has manual windows, which is great.
I think there's only one other car that had manual windows in this. All the rest were power windows.
I would say it really fits. I like the tonalities of it, actually. Apart from the very bright red, which might be part of lighting, I think that could have been toned down. But the console and the just all the meters and everything, I think this is spot on for this car. It has the feel of a simpler car still, which I think is very fitting to it being kind of a ute in air quotes. Overall, I just love it.
And our champion.
The headlights being inset is just so accurate for this era.
Yeah, that is so well done. And looking at the car in the editor, there are so many fixtures that went into making that. You got to give props to the builder. That was a lot of work, and the result is well worth it.
This car is proof that a simple front design can be the best, provided you place your fixtures correctly and have some nice spacing between the grills, which are realistic. You don't need heaps of fixtures, or at least you don't need heaps of grills and lights. You can have a nice, concise design with only a few main feature points.
Yes, and that was, I think, the general theme that the car just conveys so nicely is simplicity but elegance. I think this is by far the most elegant design of the cars that we have seen, and it instantly feels like Fruinian, as in Italian. And
yes.
I think it brings that across so well. It looks really fun to drive. It looks very fast. And it looks as if it's very sure of itself that it can provide. Like this confidence. It's just radiating confidence.
And orange.
And that too, yes.
Yes. The thing I like about it is, as you touched on, Rob, is that this car, it has an elegance and a poise, and it has a feel that it's exotic. There's something really special about it. In spite of the fact that it is, by digging through it, it's actually a relatively modest car in terms of its performance, in terms of its cost, even from the game itself. So
it does look very expensive, though.
Yep. And when you're building a sports car, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you want, is you want it to look expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive.
Just the curves overall on the car here is great, right? The slightly swoopy front, but then still managing to go towards pretty straight, strong-looking lines.
I think the only place where this car falls apart is the rear bumper.
Yeah, I agree. I mentioned that in my rear, is that the bumper choice and the taillights are a little bit of an odd choice. But
I think they are oddly appealing. Although this car has a very specific angle from where it looks like it has butt cancer. And I think we should bring that up in the animatic and just freeze frame it. Because looking from the rear, I really love the design. Looking from the front, I really love the design. Even most angles of the front, of the side rear are fantastic. And then there's this one angle where it looks like a complete mess. It's weird, really weird.
And this interior, I mean, I'm really liking it. I'm really into this.
I feel like the silver center where the stereo is super naff, and that's exactly what this car would have had.
Oh, absolutely. It's perfect late 90s, early 2000s kind of silver painted plastic that just looks cheap, but everybody did it. It's perfect.
And then a big, expensive analog clock in the center.
So from this angle, the side line there, like the corner, looks completely weirded out.
Oh no!
You see that?
Yeah.
That's what I meant with butt cancer.
Yeah, that's a very unfortunate look.
But
and
it's only for a very, very small angle.
It makes the car look like it just got sawed off at the rear. You know, like they were designing it and then they said, that's enough.
It looks like it's had a crash and they've tried pulling the panel out, but the panel beater sucks.
But there's, like I said, this is probably just like 10 degrees of viewing angle where this even happens, and it's only because of the reflections that are going on. So it's kind of hard to see, but when you see it, it's like, oh my god! In otherwise, I think otherwise so beautiful car, this really sticks out. So yeah, still found that interesting to share at least. But otherwise, this car is just looking so real and in place, and just if I was to see it on the road, I wouldn't even react like, because I don't know all the makes and all their cars ever. I would be like, yeah, that's a really good looking car. Like, what is it?
It's funny you pointed out the whole beauty thing and that there's the one flaw in it. I mean, isn't it not true that in basically all forms of art that, you know, for something truly to be beautiful, it has to have that one little flaw to make it sort of human and make it relatable?
And it's even a rule in some art that you're not allowed to have it without a flaw. That you need to actually build one in. For instance, what comes to mind is patchworking. That you have to have one tile off because only God is allowed to be perfect. And neither is this car. This is not perfect, but it's really damn good.
It is, and a very worthy champion indeed for the challenge.